Dunkirk versus 1917. Two exceptionally well-crafted war-themed films with their own unique visual style. But which of the two do I believe to be superior? Let's have them battle and find out. It's important to know that I can't judge any of the protagonists from either film based on any clear arc. Personally, what they are going through are more obstacles, morally and physically. In Dunkirk, we follow three sets of main characters. We get Alex and Tommy at the centre of the evacuation, Faria as a fighter pilot fighting the German forces airborne, and Mr. Dawson leading the rescue with a shivering soldier that desperately wants him to turn back from the slaughter. Although each of these stories take place in different timescales, they all tie in together seamlessly for the eventual third act conclusion. 1917 has a more personal hero's journey storyline, with Lance Corporal Blake alongside Lance Corporal Schofield tasked to deliver the message through enemy territory to a battalion to call off an attack. Why?
It's a trap!
To raise the stakes even higher, the story now becomes personal, because Blake's brother is part of that same battalion being led into that trap. Now, Dunkirk's main characters should win this round because they're all faced with key decisions to make, one for self, one for others. That is apparent until we meet Alex. Now, Alex never really chooses what is right for others, only for himself, which is okay, but there's no comeuppance or payoff for that.
He's a fucking Jerry, a cowardly little queue-jumping frog. He was just looking for a way off the sand like the rest of us. As soon as he pokes his head out, they'll slaughter him. Better him than me.
The important thing is, I didn't get my comeuppance, and I never will.
Schofield is a lot more like Tommy with his approach. He will do what is right even if it means sacrifices for his own well-being. His partner Blake is easily just as likable, but suffers the harsh consequences for being too confident. 1917 wins the round. Neither movie has an outright central antagonist, more of a threat. The threat in Dunkirk isn't to unleash any kind of grand scheme to win the war or anything like that, no. Which sounds like there is no goal here. But no, any decent threat is usually written to be the polar opposite of what the heroes strive for. In this case, the main heroes alongside 330,000 others must be evacuated. The enemy forces goal? Simple. Similar can be said regarding 1917's enemy forces, although they do have a plan of action set up, a trap for over 1,600 fellow comrades. Again, it's a clear and obvious goal of protagonists, Blake and Schofield, that is, the opposite. They have to warn the battalion to avoid the trap, the enemy forces have to make sure it goes to plan. The only drawback is that Blake and Schofield have more the element of surprise on their side. Whereas Tommy and Alex, the threat is scary because the enemy, well, they know exactly where they are, there's no hiding there at all. As each hour passes, more enemy forces arrive as well. The winner has to be decided by the stakes and how clearly defined they are. Now, as tense as a race against time is to save 1,600 lives is for 1917, it doesn't quite feel as dread-filling as over 330,000 soldiers facing a similar race against time, with the rescue being led by, as Cillian Murphy calls it, weekend soldiers. Dunkirk wins the round. Both movies shine pretty much shoulder to shoulder in their visual strengths. Dunkirk's visuals were led by director Christopher Nolan's right-hand man, Hoyt van Hoytema. Am I saying that right? 1917's visuals were down to one of director Sam Mendes' most experienced cinematographers in the business, Richard Deakins. Hoyt constructed Dunkirk with a keen eye for visual detail, from the Stuka bombers, practical visual effects, and the perspective always level with the protagonist we're following. This would normally be enough to win any round. However, 1917 challenges with a strategy that Nolan has ever tried to do. Have the story conveyed in single one-shot takes. Okay, yes, the entire film isn't in one shot, and you do notice the occasional cut here and there, but what an effort this must have been for Deakins. It never feels cheap or like a gimmick, because we always are following Schofield and Blake as if we are the third soldier, travelling through the conflict. Both films soar with their visual structure, but 1917 wins it for a visual structure that nobody has quite executed as gripping before. The majority of Dunkirk is scored by Hans Zimmer, while the majority of 1917 is scored by James Newman. Both OSTs are excellent at ramping up tension during key moments in both films. Zimmer in particular is very effective with layered orchestral glissando strings that sound like they are endlessly building up, keeping you on edge. Newman's has built this more atmosphere building, but that works because 1917's strength isn't always on being a spectacle. It's a smaller scope of perspective between Blake and Schofield, which at times needs to focus on the closer-knit moments than going all-out attack. All that is left to compare is the two films' major covers. Zimmer's slight variation of Nimrod during the final escape versus the cover of I'm a Poor Wayfaring Stranger, covered by Josh Slovic. Both of them are an amazing choice at fitting each other's tones. Nimrod feels more about triumphant in the face of escaping death. Wandering Stranger is a lot more stripped down. There's no music to accompany it. It holds no punches in terms of raw emotion. It is another insanely difficult choice to make, but no matter how hard-hitting 1917 can be at its best, it doesn't quite add up in terms of spelling pure anxiety in musical form like Zimmer can do. Dunkirk wins by a microscopic margin. In Dunkirk, it's the first Stuka bombing scene at the beginning. This moment brilliantly sets up the biggest threat our heroes face from above, and what they're capable of. What makes it so effective is not only how real the bombers look, but the point of view is with the soldiers the whole time, as if we are facing this attack ourselves. There's no obvious CGI, there's no shot of the enemy pilots either. Every explosion feels devastatingly real, as if we're next to Tommy watching them. The line of explosions that draw ever closer is unbearably tense too. The sense of relief when that last one stops right next to Tommy is a masterclass in not only suspense, but also setting up what our heroes are up against. In 1917, it's the final dash for Schofield to deliver that message to the battalion commander. As each moment passes, more and more lives are sent to the slaughter. It only adds to devastation when you think he's found the right one, and no, it's not. He has to keep going and find the one to call off the doomed attack. Because we're following him the whole time, with Newman's score swelling more drastically, the tension levels are unbearably similar to my favourite Dunkirk scene. Every explosion feels ever more real, because once again, we are following Schofield the whole time. The crew behind this scene can only get this in 4 takes because, well, of limited resources, and of course making sure the natural light didn't change too much, or it was back shooting for the next day. In the end, I've got to give this to 1917. Now don't get me wrong, Dunkirk is a fantastic, even at times, gut-wrenchingly horrifying war film to watch. The realism is outstanding, and typically Nolan-like, really, switching time periods between 3 stories, blending them together. It's at a larger scale than 1917, but larger scale doesn't always mean better. Some of you may have preferred if I judged on historical accuracy of both events, although we could have done that, but we'd be here all day pointing out little bits of information that may or may not have been true, so that wasn't really worth it. The point of this was more about which story, based fundamentally around the World Wars 1 and 2, were more engaging. Which story was better to be told and how was it created? And that's why I give it to 1917. I hope you enjoyed it.
Sing